Hello everyone. Dipali Ingle welcomes you on behalf of Saraswat International Academy, Ratavapi. In this second video, we will learn chapter 1st, class 12th, part 2. And we will cover in this video page number 5, 6, 7 and 8. So let's move on to the lesson. In the first video, we have learned about M. Hamel and France and description about the last class of their French class. So let's move on to the next paragraph. And we also learn about the importance of mother tongue. Poor man. It was in honor of this last lesson that he had put on his fine Sunday clothes, and now I understood why the old men in the village were sitting there in the back of the room. It was because they were sorry too that they had not gone to school more. It was their way of thanking our master for his 40 years of faithful service and showing their respect for the country that was theirs no more. Now, Franz was feeling sorry for his teacher. He realized and understood why his teacher was dressed in a special way. He also understood that why the village people were also in the classroom. They were also feeling sorry for they were also feeling sorry that no more French is going on to be taught there, and French was their mother tongue. The were also sitting there to show their respect towards the teacher. And who was the teacher here? M. Hamel. To show the respect to their language, to their country. Now French has been occupied by the Germans. We all knew that. M. Hamel was serving there for 40 years. He was a faithful teacher, teaching French to the village people. So all villagers came to show their respect to their mother tongue, to their country, and M. Hamel. I heard M. Hamel say to me, I won't scold you, little Franz. You must feel bad enough. See how it is. Every day we have said to ourselves, Bah, I have plenty of time. I will learn it tomorrow. And now you see where we have come out. Ah, that's the great trouble with Elsie. She puts off learning till tomorrow. Now those fellows out there will have the right to say to you, how is it you pretend to be Frenchmen and yet you can neither speak nor write your own language? But you are not the worst, poor little France. We have all a great deal to reproach ourselves with. Reproach here means to feel disappointed. Your parents were not anxious enough to have you learn. They preferred to put you to work on a farm or at the mills so as to have a little more money. And I have been to blame also. Have I not often sent you to water my flowers instead of learning your lessons? And when I wanted to go fishing, did I not just give you a holiday? So, when Franz was worried, frightened, he was very scared, his teacher spoke to him and said, I'm not going to scold you, Franz. Don't worry about it. He's telling the general attitude of the people to Franz, like everybody is trying to postpone their work. He also told Franz that Franz also always wanted to postponed the lesson. That's why he couldn't learn his lessons properly. He's trying to tell everybody, the people sitting there, they are going to make fun of you. What means they don't know how to speak or write their own mother tongue. So Hamill is telling everybody, we all have to feel disappointed with ourselves. What M. Hamill is saying, that their parents means children's parents didn't want to learn them. They always wanted to earn more money. So instead of sending the children school, what they used to do, they send them to work on a farm or at mills so that they can earn money. So, and he is not blaming the parents alone. He is blaming to himself also. And why he is blaming to himself? Because he also sent the children to water the flowers instead of learning the lessons. He was again trying to blame himself because whenever he wanted to go to fishing, he would declare a holiday for the children. So he is blaming the parents as well as himself for not learning the lessons properly by the children. Then, from one thing to another, M. Hamil went on to talk the French language, saying that it was the most beautiful language in the world, the clearest and the most logical. Logical means sensible language, that we must guard it among us and never forget it. Because when a people are enslaved, as long as they hold fast to their language, it is say if they had the key to their prison. Then he opened a grammar and read us our lesson. I was amazed to see how well I understood it. All he said seemed so easy, so easy. I think too that I never listened so carefully and that he had never explained everything with so much patience. It seemed almost as if the poor man wanted to give us all he knew before going away, and it put it all into our heads at one stroke. So then he started talking about the French language. M. Hamil started talking about French language. He said that it is the most clearest and the most logical language, sensible language. He also told the people sitting there to safeguard their language and never forget it, especially. Why? Why he said, why he emphasized that language? Because it is a mother tongue. You know, children, mother tongue. Do you love your mother tongue? Mother tongue is always very close to our heart, and it is also very, very important for us. So, knowing your mother tongue is like a key to a prison. So, he said, learning the mother tongue is very important for every citizen. After talking about the importance of French language, he taught them all grammar. Franz was so surprised. And why he was so surprised? That it was so easy for him to understand. So he thought that maybe it was the first time he was listening very carefully. In previous time he was not so serious about his studies. He also thought that M. Hamill was explaining the lesson with so much of patience. Now, at the last moment, the students were very much serious about the learning in one shot, and the teacher also wanted to teach them whatever he knew. So, all they were busy in learning which language? French language. And M. Hamill also emphasized, also told them the importance of importance of learning their mother tongue, because mother tongue is very important for every citizen. After the grammar, we had a lesson in writing. That day, M. Hamill had new copies for us, written in a beautiful round hand. France, Alsace, France, Alsace. They looked like flags floating everywhere in the schoolroom, hung from the rod at the top of our desks. You ought to have seen how everyone set to work and how quiet it was. The only sound was the scratching of the pens over the paper. Once some beetles flew in, but nobody paid any attention to them, not even the littlest ones, who worked right on tracing their fish hooks, as if that was French too. On the roof of the pigeons cooed very low, and I thought to myself, will they make them sing in German, even in the pigeons? After the German lessons, they had something in writing. He also, M. Hamill also had new copies, new notebooks of paper, and he thought the letters of France Alsace were floating all everywhere inside the classroom. And everywhere, everyone was so busy. They all were learning French. Everyone was so busy in their work that it was very quiet there. Everybody was so attentive in the class, and everyone was so interested in doing their work. One could hear only the sound of writing was going on. Everybody was writing, writing, and they were very attentive in the class. They were very busy in that class. When they were writing, some insects like beetles flew inside, but nobody cared about them. The little children were busy on tracing their letters, because so much of importance was given to French that day. And why it was? Because it was the last day of teaching French according to the teacher. And what happened here? Something Franz noticed. And what he noticed? Some beetles. And he also noticed some pigeons sitting on the roof. They were cooing. He was thinking in mind, will these German people make these pigeons go in German language? Means he thought German must be uh, forcing those pigeons also to impose that to going in the German people also in the going these pigeons in the German language. He was very surprised about the pigeons. Whenever I looked up for my writing, I saw M. Hamill sitting motionless in his chair and gazing first at one thing, then at another, as if he wanted to fix in his mind just how everything looked in that little schoolroom. Fancy. Fancy here means imagine. For 40 years, he had been there in the same place with his garden outside the window and his class in front of him. Just like that, only the desks and benches had been worn smooth. The walnut trees in the garden were taller, and the hop vine that he had planted himself twined about the windows of to the roof. Hop vine means kind of a climber. How it must have broken his heart to leave it all, poor man, to hear his sister moving about in the room above, packing their trunks, for they must leave the country next day. So when Franz saw M. Hamill, M. Hamill was not moving from his chair. So he was just trying to uh, look things that were there inside the classroom. Imagine he was there for 40 years. And what could remind him? The garden, the class in front of him, everything was the same. There were only small changes. And which were the small changes that had taken place? Only the desk and the benches were worn out. And why? They were smooth because of usage. He had planted some climbers, hopvine, and walnut trees. They were grew taller. These were the only changes. Franz was feeling very sad because his teacher. Why Franz was feeling sad? Because his teacher has to leave from here now. He could also feel the movement upstairs because the teacher's sister was packing all the trunks. They were getting ready to leave the next day. And why they were getting ready? Because from the next day, only Germans has to taught in the classes. So Franz told Kim M. Hamill and his sister was getting ready to leave the next day. But he had the courage to hear every lesson to very last. After the writing, we had a lesson in history. Very last. Then the babies chanted their ba, be, bee, bo, boo. Down there at the back of the room, old Hosser had put on his spectacles and, holding his primer in both hands, spelled the letters with him. You could see that he too was crying. His voice trembled with emotion. And it was so funny to hear him that we all wanted to laugh and cry. Ah, how well I remember it that the last lesson. So, Franz remembered his last lesson, and he is saying that as he was thinking, the clock struck one. But now he was very upset. After writing a session, they had a session in history. The small children were taught the letters in French. And an old man, what was that old man's name? Old man Hosser was also sitting there. And what he was holding in his hand? A primer, along with the children. He also spelled the letters. The old man Hosser also very sad because it was the last class of French. So at this point, you can see that how everybody was overcome up with the emotions because it was their last French lesson. They were feeling very sad. All at once, the church clock struck 12. Then the Angelus. Angelus means Roman Catholic prayer. At the same moment, The trumpets at the Prussians returning from drill sounded under our windows. M. Hamill stood up, very pale, in his chair. I never saw him look so tall. My friend said I. But something choked him. He could not go on. Then he turned to the blackboard, took a piece of chalk, and bearing on with all his might, he wrote as large as he could, Vive la France. Then he stopped, leaned his head against the wall, and without a word, he made a gesture to us with his hand. School is dismissed. You may go. So he remembered his last lesson. And he is saying that as he was thinking, the clock struck 12. He could hear the prayer at that time in the church. He could also hear the trumpets made by the Russians. As soon as his teacher heard these sounds, he stood up from his chair. And how he was looking? Very pale and dull. The teacher addressed everybody. My friends, he wanted to say something, but he was feeling choked. He was overcome with his emotions. Actually, it was his last lesson, and he was not able to speak anything at all. So, what he did, he just turned to the blackboard and wrote, Vive la France. That means long live France. So you saw how emotional he was that time. He was not even able to speak and a word. He just told everybody that the school is dismissed and you may go now. So, children, from this lesson, we can understand the pain undergone by each and everyone in this Alsace and Lorraine after being enforced to speak and learn some other language. The Germans had imposed their language on these people. They will not get now they will not get a chance to learn their own language, mother tongue, that is French, and they will be forced to learn the other subject, that is German. So, children, with this, we have completed this chapter, and you can refer the PDF for question and answers. Thank you so much.